Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Time Traveler, the 1930s. Today, well, first of all, you'll notice that my voice is a little funky. Could be allergies, might be some crying. We'll see. Anyway, continuing on. Today's guest is someone that I've been doing a lot of research on, have been listening to for decades, have had increased respect for her in the last several months. And it took me a long time to put this one together because I am just devastated by her story. I'm talking about none other than Miss Billie Holiday. She was born Eleanora Fagan on April 7th, 1915, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She was the daughter of a teenage unwed couple, Sarah Julia Fagan, known as Sadie, and Clarence Halliday. Sadie had been living in Baltimore, Maryland, when she became pregnant, but her parents kicked her out of the family home. Shortly after the child's birth, Clarence abandoned his family to pursue a career as a jazz musician. Eleanora ended up with Sadie's older married sister Eva, while Sadie worked on passenger cars for railroad companies, forcing her to travel. They were in Baltimore, and although Eva was supposed to care for Eleanora, she was being raised the majority of the time by Eva's mother-in-law, Martha Miller. She suffered the absence of her mother and the inconsistent care of strangers for the better part of the first decade of her life. Eleanora attended the St. Francis Academy and had a great deal of trouble with truancy. She skipped school every chance she got. She eventually ended up in the House of the Good Shepherd, which was a Catholic reform school. She was also baptized there. After 9 months at the reform facility, Eleanora was released to her mother on October 3, 1925. Sadie opened a restaurant called the East Side Grill, where she worked side by side with Eleanora. They worked extremely long hours, and by age 11, the young lady had dropped out of school. On Christmas Eve of 1926, Sadie came home and witnessed the attempted rape of her daughter by neighbor Wilbur Rich. Eleanora fought back, and the man was arrested, but Eleanora ended up back at the Good Shepherd School under protective custody. She was released in February of 1927, not quite 12 years old, and already having seen some of the worst that the world had to offer. At this point in her life, Eleanora took a job in a brothel. At first, she was doing errands and cleaning the building inside and out. She also did cleaning for others in the neighborhood. But before long, she was expected to please the men who came to their establishment. At this point in her life, Eleanora began listening to Louis Armstrong and being inspired by singers like Bessie Smith. By the end of 1928, Sadie moved to Harlem, leaving Eleanora with Martha Miller yet again. This time, Eleanora decided to move to Harlem to be with her mother in early 1929. During her teenage years, Eleanora began singing in Harlem nightclubs. She took the name of American actress Billie Dove as her stage name and blended it with the name of her father, Halliday, eventually changing it to Holiday. Thus was born the jazz icon Billie Holiday. Holiday went on to sing at a wide variety of clubs and became recognized by many of the famous musicians of the day, including big band legend Benny Goodman in 1931. During her travels, she met up with her father, who was still performing most recently with the Fletcher Henderson Band. Miss Holiday turned a tender 17 years old in 1932 and was singing regularly at a club called Covan's on West 132nd Street. Producer John Hammond made a trip to hear her and was so impressed that he made arrangements to have a recording made. She made her recording debut in November of 1933 at age 18. By the side of Benny Goodman, singing 2 songs that dazzled jazz fans. Among them was Hammond himself, who described Holiday's vocal style as genius. He found her ability to improvise like any other jazz instrument set her apart from all female singers who came before. Hammond even compared Holiday to her childhood idol, Louis Armstrong. He could not believe her command of music and lyricism at such a young age. In 1935, she was given a small role in Duke Ellington's Symphony in Black, a rhapsody of Negro life. The young artist was signed to the Brunswick label by John Hammond in order to begin recording pop and swing tunes that were popular at the time. Producers tried to make Holiday mimic the sound of her predecessors, but Holiday's voice was so unique that after the success of What a Little Moonlight Can Do in her own improvised croon, the label began to see the merit in letting her pave her own way. In the latter part of 1937, she was blessed with a short appearance as a big band singer with Count Basie. They traveled and endured poor conditions, but Billie was given creative freedom to select and arrange her own songs. She began to develop a persona of the woman who is unlucky in love. In addition to her success, she found herself competing with fellow songstress Ella Fitzgerald. Despite their basic rivalry, the two became friends in time. Fitzgerald was singing for the Chick Webb Band, while Holiday sang with Count Basie, and on January 16, 1938, they performed in a battle of the bands, with the public selecting Fitzgerald by a slim margin. By February, Holiday was released from the Basie group due to temperamental behavior. In truth, she was complaining about working conditions, among other things, but it worked out in the end, and she was hired by Artie Shaw shortly afterward. She was one of the first black women to sing in front of a fully white orchestra, and they toured the segregated South with a white band leader. Artie Shaw stood up for his vocalists, including Holiday. She was often asked to sit in segregated locations, away from the band, and was heckled by the audience. But Shaw always took up for her and asked her to join them, never reprimanding her for her temper when being verbally abused by her audience. Shaw and Holiday ended up on New York City's WABC network, now WCBS, broadcast on 2 separate occasions, which increased their exposure. In May of 1938, Artie Shaw's band won battles against Tommy Dorsey and Red Norvo, with audiences always favoring Holiday's vocals. Artie always said that Holiday had a remarkable ear and praised her sense of timing and rhythm, but she was soon to move on from her beloved band. During a stay at the Lincoln Hotel, she was asked to use the service elevator instead of the guest elevator. In addition to this humiliation, Holiday told stories about the incident, saying that she was never allowed to enter the dining room or the bar where the rest of the band members were, and she was always expected to leave through the kitchen entrance. She decided to leave the band shortly after the Lincoln Hotel incident. There are no remaining recordings of her singing with the Artie Shaw Band. However, Shaw recorded 1 record with her, playing clarinet on 4 of her songs, Did I Remember, No Regrets, Summertime, and Billie's Blues. In September of 1938, Holiday released a single called I'm Gonna Lock My Heart on the Vocalion record label. It peaked at number 2 on the pop charts and was listed as the 4th bestseller of the month. In 1939, Billie Holiday began recording for the Columbia label and was introduced to the song that would change her life, Strange Fruit. It was based upon a poem written by Abel Maripol, a Jewish schoolteacher from the Bronx who used the pseudonym Lewis Allen, and the subject matter, the lynching of Black Americans. The song was introduced to Holiday by the owner of New York City nightclub Cafe Society. It was an integrated nightclub in Greenwich Village. When Holiday read the lyrics, she was deeply moved because of the evil that was being perpetrated on blacks, but also because it reminded her of her own father's death. He died at age 39, having suffered from a fatal lung illness. When he went to the hospital for help, he was turned away because of the color of his skin and died. A bill went before the United States Senate to ban the lynching of African Americans in 1937. It did not pass. Singing this song was a way for Billie's voice to depict the horror of violent segregation and racism in America, and to remind the world how to treat each other. She hesitated to perform it for fear of retaliation, but she did. The waiters were instructed to hush the audience before she sang, and as the introduction played, the lights were slowly dimmed to complete darkness. All movement ceased, and then a single spotlight illuminated Holiday's face as she began.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. trim the poplar trees.
Columbia found the lyrics to be too sensitive for them to record, but American record producer Milt Gabler agreed to record it on the Commodore Records label. It increased Holiday's popularity and became her biggest-selling record. She even appeared in Time magazine. She said that she arrived at Cafe Society as an unknown and left 2 years later as a star. She demanded more money and returned to Commodore in 1944 to record more songs that she had performed with Teddy Wilson, as well as some new songs that other singers had made famous, putting her own beautiful style to them. Among these were Gershwin's Embraceable You, which was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2005. She continued to build her success in the 1940s, and her mother Sadie took on a nickname, the Duchess, and opened a restaurant called Mom Holidays. She used money from her daughter to fund her business, but when Holiday came into hard times, her mother refused to help her. As Billie walked out, she shouted, "God help the child that's got his own." Those words later made it into a song that was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1976. In 1942, Holiday was still with Columbia Records, but Capitol Records also wanted to sign her, so she took on the pseudonym Lady Day. In the fall of 1943, Life magazine wrote that Holiday had the most distinct style of any popular vocalist. Milt Gabler was still in Holiday's life and now working with Decca Records. He signed her to the label in August of 1944. Holiday was now 29 years old. She was ready to create more sophisticated music and asked to have strings on her recordings, a sound that was associated with Sinatra and Fitzgerald. She got the string ensemble and was overwhelmed with joy. After catching husband Jimmy Monroe with lipstick on his collar, she wrote Don't Explain and recorded it with Decca Records, along with The Old Devil Called Love. She was married to Jimmy from 1941 to 1947. Billie took a short break and began recording again in 1945 when she made changes to some of her old recorded lyrics. In 1946, Holiday took a stab at acting in a film called New Orleans, but her parts and music were largely cut from the film, and she had been getting heroin to her on set by her dealer and future husband, Joe Guy. She was earning over $1,000 per week, but spending most of it on drugs. In the mid to late 1940s, Holiday began recording slow ballads, despite the media believing that this new formula would wear thin and offer little variation in melodies for her audience. Even so, Billie was able to perform with her longtime idol, Louis Armstrong, who also appeared in the film New Orleans. At her peak, Billie was making $250,000 a year. But in May of 1947, her world came crashing down. Strange Fruit had become the anthem of the civil rights movement, and Black Americans everywhere who were fighting simply to be treated as human beings. She sang the song in predominantly white clubs. Those who supported her cause were proud to witness her performance and clapped with pride. Those who did not believe in the cause simply walked out. One such patron was Federal Bureau of Narcotics Commissioner Harry J. Anslinger. He was known to be racist and believed that black people, especially those who used drugs, often overstepped boundaries. Singing in a nightclub fell into that category. He said that they smoked marijuana and created the devil's music. Anslinger demanded that Holiday stop performing Strange Fruit, but she refused to silence the message. She sang the song in nightclubs and would be chased out of the clubs and shot at as she drove away. And even though this happened more than once, she bravely stood before audiences night after night and delivered the raw and ugly images of what was being done to colored Americans. This was the moment when Anslinger decided to ruin her life and silence her voice. He knew that Holiday was a drug user and devised a plan to frame her by recruiting his men to sell her heroin. The plan was a success and landed Holiday in prison for over a year. Federal authorities made sure that she lost her New York City cabaret card, which prohibited her from singing in any venue that sold alcohol. They stole the one love of her life from her, further damaging her reputation. J. Edgar Hoover was at the root of the plan and fueled Anslinger's fire to destroy her. Billie said of her trial, the United States versus Billie Holiday felt like exactly that. She felt that no one in the world would stand and represent her, that no one was interested in looking out for her. As a side note, if you want to see a modern depiction of this tragic part of Holiday's story, please head over to Hulu and watch the 2021 film The United States versus Billie Holiday, starring singer and actress Andra Day. It is an amazing film with beautiful sets, phenomenal acting, a good amount of historical accuracy, and Andra Day's performance is stellar. If you love Billie Holiday's music, you should know her story. The link is in the description. Holiday was released from prison early due to good behavior, and her pianist, Bobby, and her beloved dog, Mister, were waiting for her. Holiday's manager believed that a comeback at Carnegie Hall would resuscitate her career. She hesitated, fearing that audiences would no longer accept her. She agreed to appear, and the appearance sold out, with 2,700 tickets sold, which was a record for the venue at the time. She wore her trademark gardenias in her hair and mesmerized her audience. Her promotion team arranged for a Broadway show for her. It was called Holiday on Broadway. At this point in her career, Holiday became among the first to begin integrating audiences. Whites and blacks sat intermixed, enjoying the music that poured out of her. It was a suspension of the racial terror that the world had come to know, and for a short time, everyone could simply take part in something beautiful. Billie Holiday was arrested one more time in January of 1949, but was released this time. There was not sufficient proof that she was still engaging in hard drugs. But she was, still smoking, drinking, and succumbing to heroin when her past became too much for her soul to bear. Later that year, she recorded Crazy He Calls Me, which was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2010. Although the song achieved great success, Holiday had been suffering from a lack of revenue since her cabaret card had been revoked. She had been making money from nightclub appearances, but had not been receiving royalties from recordings, especially songs that were not in the top 30 in the 1940s. It wasn't until she signed with Decca Records that she received some of her royalties. In the 1950s, Holiday's records went out of print, and thus her funds dwindled even further. With money dwindling, Holiday had agreed to sing at the Ebony Club in 1948, when a man named John Levy said that he had the power to get her club card back. She thought she would be arrested for singing there, but the evening went without incident. She was received with open arms, and the crowd loved her. Also in 1948, Holiday recorded another Gershwin tune from Porgy and Bess, I Loves You Porgy, a classic. In 1950, Billie appeared in a short film for Universal Pictures called Sugar Child Robinson, Billie Holiday, Count Basie, and His Sextet. In it, she sang God Bless the Child and Now Baby or Never. Holiday was married to Joe Guy from 1951 to 1957 and continued to smoke, drink, and use drugs. She was also frequently physically abused by the men in her life. The years of substance abuse began to show in her voice and began to deteriorate her body. She appeared on an ABC series called The Comeback Story and eventually decided to take on her first tour of Europe in 1954. Some of her performances were released as records that same year. Billie Holiday's autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues, was ghostwritten by William Duffy, published in 1956, and depicting a somewhat accurate account of Holiday's life, minus details that many have speculated were left out to avoid the possibility of legal action. Holiday's story with Anslinger was never meant to see the light of day. In 2015, Columbia University professor John Swed published a study on her life and made the argument that the book left out some crucial details of Holiday's personal life as well. Among these details, relationships with English actor Charles Laughton and Tallulah Bankhead, a prominent American actress. It was said that she also had an affair with Orson Welles, right around the time he would have been working on Citizen Kane. Along with the autobiography, Holiday released an album titled Lady Sings the Blues in 1956. She re-recorded several of her biggest hits and was still able to capture the magic that captivated her audiences. In November of 1956, Holiday performed before the Carnegie Hall audience again, 2 more times, both sold out. The live recordings were released on the Verve HMV label in the United Kingdom. This occurred in 1961, and the collection was called The Essential Billie Holiday. The liner notes were extensive and sang her praises as an artist who was palpably reaching out to her audience, reaching them with her voice, her smile, and her warmth. She seemed to finally be at ease as the star that she was. She married Louis McKay in 1957. He was a mob man and treated Holiday poorly, as did many of her previous partners. His physical abuse was a regular occurrence. He had plans to begin a chain of vocal studios in Holiday's name, but the plan never came to fruition. Neither did any thought of being a mother. She had no children of her own, but had 2 godchildren that she loved. Holiday performed fine and mellow on the CBS television program The Sound of Jazz, performing with her longtime friend Lester Young. He passed away in the spring of 1959, and although Billie felt she should sing at his funeral, she was not permitted to. Holiday returned to Europe in 1959 to record an album with Ray Ellis and his orchestra in London. MGM Records released it after Holiday's death and later re-released it under the title Last Recording. It was around this time that Holiday was diagnosed with cirrhosis. She stopped drinking for a short time but then resumed her bad habits, feeling that it was too late to truly make any difference. She lost 20 pounds and was constantly being harassed by those around her to go to the hospital. Finally, on May 31st, 1959, Holiday was taken to Metropolitan Hospital in New York to be treated for liver and heart disease. Commissioner Anslinger of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics had been pursuing her since she first sang Strange Fruit in 1939, and Anslinger never gave up. He ordered that her hospital room be raided as she lay dying, and she was watched by police who were stationed in her room at all times. Sources say that Anslinger ordered the hospital to stop providing methadone and life-sustaining measures to Holiday, which caused the final decline of her broken body. She received her last rites from a Roman Catholic priest on July 15th as pulmonary edema and heart failure, both caused by the cirrhosis of the liver, took her life. She died at 3:10 a.m. on July 17th at age 44. She was arrested in her deathbed by the relentless federal agent, never receiving a moment's peace, even as she slipped across the veil. The men in her life had been swindling her of her earnings throughout the final years of her life, and upon her passing, she was left with 70 cents in the bank. Famous but always suffering, her legacy was so much bigger than jazz lovers realized. She was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, Jazz Wall of Fame, and received dozens of awards posthumously. There is a statue of Billie Holiday in Baltimore, erected in 1993, with panels depicting images from Strange Fruit to commemorate her impact on the world. In 2019, wife of New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, Shirlane McRae, made an announcement that there would be a statue of Billie erected in Queensboro Hall, and there is also a monument to Billie in Baltimore's Upton neighborhood. Holiday's work was largely destroyed in the Universal Studios fire in 2008, along with hundreds of other artists' work. Even so, her influence on the music world is unparalleled. There were many films that were graced by her voice and appearance, multiple albums of her amazing vocal repertoire, and several films and documentaries that have been made about her life. She has intrigued generations, but it is only now that we can fully see her story for what it truly was. She was so much more than an innovative singer. She was a human being who lived in fear, who struggled, and who was ultimately extinguished by the United States government. I know I've been getting on Twitter and saying how difficult the story was. And it was. It took a chunk out of me. I've always been a big supporter of civil rights. I was just devastated to find out just how far this woman was persecuted. And it didn't matter who she was. It was relentless, and it was terrifying, and it breaks my heart. And it makes me think about the situation that we've been in for the last few years. Gosh, for hundreds of years. But it's not over. And there's the hashtag out there of Black Lives Still Matter. They've always mattered. And I guess to some people, that's a joke. And it makes me sick. And it was really hard to put this one together. There has been a lot of stuff going on with me and in my life that has kind of kept me away from really, really digging in and just finishing this video. But really, the thing that made it most difficult was just the research and the corroborating of facts and realizing that it was true. And then watching the movie and realizing how accurate of a depiction it was. It was a beautifully made film, but I cried several times during that film. And I recommend that you watch it. Really, just submerge yourself in it. There is some embellishment there, but the basic story, the truths in the story, the history of what we've been doing in this country, it's all true, and it's awful. And I just wanted to make this video and put a tiny piece of that song out there and just encourage people to look it up and be involved. Andre Day's been performing Strange Fruit for years, so doing it in the film, it wasn't new, but it was very different. And there are some clips of interviews with Andre Day. She has always loved Billie Holiday and even took a piece of her name from her, from Lady Day. She's Andre Day. And I feel like she paid a beautiful homage to the singer and woman. And I could talk for hours about this because I went from enraged to sobbing and just very deflated about everything that this country has gone through. And I really do feel that we all deserve respect, just at a very basic level. And I know it's still not happening out there. And it's sad. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for supporting this series. It has become something much bigger than I expected. For me, I don't know about for you guys, but I appreciate you coming and watching and just being here with me while I discover things about the people that built our world. Until next time, I hope you're all happy, safe, and healthy, and that you have a beautiful day.